bad.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. I'm your host, Ricardo Venz, also known as Ricky Brands, and a great episode for you today. Returning guest, Brian Festa from the CT Freedom Alliance, and now his new nonprofit organization called We The People. No, I messed that up. We The Patriots USA, and they both have Facebook groups, so if you just search We The Patriots USA or CT Freedom Alliance, you can find their Facebook groups on Facebook, obviously. I'll also put those links in the show description, so easy way of kind of connecting with them. But it's a lot of like-minded people who are fighting back against vaccines, fighting back against mandatory masks, and all these issues that obviously I'm super passionate about. Brian will go into more on this episode on what We The Patriots USA is all about and what they're trying to do. If you want to hear his personal story, him and his co-founder Don was on episode 230 of the Ripple Effect Podcast. Just search for that and you'll be able to find it. And they tell their own personal story on what happened in their lives to motivate them to get together and start these organizations. Very much worth going back and checking out that episode if you haven't. And today, another great episode, and we talk about, of course, all the current hot topics: mask wearing, coronavirus, vaccines, all that stuff. So if you're not sick of hearing all those topics, then please stay tuned because we have a great conversation for you. Also, we talk about his nonprofit organizations, which I think are super important, and hopefully you guys will check out and connect with them and maybe even support them. So that's the goal. Also, recently, awesome experience. I mean, this is how much these shows are connecting with people. I'm running into more and more people who are listening to the show, fans of the show. Just recently, I was on a job site. As most of you know, I work construction full-time. Officer working a police detail offered me money because he says he listens to the show all the time. He was actually listening to it at that exact moment and felt bad that he hasn't contributed anything. And I told him just spreading the word about the show, telling people about it is doing more than enough. And of course, I didn't take his money because I felt weird taking his money. But if you can support the show, I do have a Patreon page if you want to support the show financially. But like I told him and I tell everybody, if you can't support the show financially, spread the word, share the show, tweet the show, upload the show anywhere you want. It's all open source, and hopefully somebody who's in a better financial position and spot can kind of take the load with supporting the show financially. So I don't want people having issues paying their bills and supporting my show, or having issues, worrying about not being able to buy organic food or food at all because they're supporting the show. So I don't want any of that. I want people who are in a good financial position where they can donate $1, $5. I just had a $20 donation on Patreon, which is phenomenal. It's my first $20 donation, I believe, so that's really awesome. But yeah, if you can support the show financially, obviously that's one step closer to doing this full time and being able to do more of these shows. But if you can't, then just spread the word, and that goes a long way. So there's people who can financially support the show who hopefully will hear this, and like I said, they'll help out with with the whole community and financially supporting the show. So you guys are loving the Union of the Unwanted shows. So the next one will be, I believe, the 17th, August 17th. I will be streaming it on my YouTube channel. It's always streamed also on the OBDM YouTube channel. It's all alternative media roundtable discussion. We get a bunch of people from alternative media, share ideas, network, and just share our research and what's going on in our lives and stuff that we're talking about on our own shows. So it's been really fun and a lot of positive feedback. So hopefully that keeps growing. I started with Midnight Mike from OBDM show, Charlie Robinson from the Macroaggressions podcast, which I was just a guest on recently. So if you want to hear more about Big Pharma, nutrition, vaccines, that's what basically the focus of that conversation was about. So definitely check that out. Charlie Robinson, Macroaggressions. He's also the author of The Octopus of Global Control, which you guys might have heard of, especially if you're in the alternative media, alternative history world. And then also, how can I forget Sam Tripoli, our brother from a Armenian mother, Sam Tripoli from the Tinfoil Hat podcast. He couldn't make the last one, but hopefully we'll definitely make the next one. And we have a great group of guests already booked for the next Union of the Unwanted, so definitely check that out. I think I've ranted enough. Enjoy the show, guys, and I will see you on the next one. Peace. Thanks, Brian, for being with me from the CT Freedom Alliance. I don't know if you've listened to quite a few of my shows. I brought you guys up because I'm such a fan of what you guys are doing. Something you hear people talk a lot about is like, well, what can I do? What can I do? And I always tell people, like, sparking the conversation, hopefully opening people's minds to different perspectives and what's going on in the world is definitely something that can help. But the next step is always actually doing something. More than that, and that's what you guys have been doing with the CT Freedom Alliance. I've actually had a lot of people contact me in regards to hearing episodes that I've done talking about vaccines. I actually had a listener who listened to my appearance on Charlie Robinson's podcast, The Macroaggressions, and brought up, hey, who's the CT Freedom Alliance? And I'm like, hey, join the group. You can find them on Facebook and whatnot. And I've helped people out by giving them the form for religious exceptions and all that stuff, and so it's funny how I've been people. I don't know if people can just tell that vaccines is one of those topics that I'm passionate about, but people seem to come to me with those type of questions and issues more than just about anything. I think similar to yourself, it's hard not to be passionate about the topic. It is one of those topics where it's just like when you're talking about harming families, harming kids, or just the suppression of the alternative perspective on vaccines. It is so outrageous that it's hard not to get upset about it. So, but yeah, so like I said, I'm a huge fan of your work. I'm glad to have you back on, and I'm glad that you guys are now going down another, starting another battle with the mask thing, because I think this all goes hand in hand and whatnot. So, yeah. So people who are listening who aren't familiar with the CT Freedom Alliance and also your new group, can you give just kind of overview on what exactly the organization's about?
Sure. And thank you, Ricky, for that. And thank you for your support. And thank you for having us or having me back on again. Dawn was going to join us this morning, my co-founder, but she's having some technical problems. We get hit really bad by a very major storm in the Northeast, which I know you were affected by as well. So we're doing our best, but we're very glad to be back. And we're doing a lot of things. It seems like since this whole lockdown started, I don't think I've talked to you. It's been a couple of months, but since this whole lockdown started, we've actually been busier than we ever have before. Even though we've been locked in our houses for much of it, there's just so much going on. So much is being thrown at us all at once. It seems like every day you wake up and there's a new way the world's ending, right?
Yeah.
So we did start a new national organization in response to everything that's going on right now. We felt there's a need to move this beyond just Connecticut, which is our home base, but we saw that there was definitely a need to take this on at a national level. So we formed a new group called We The Patriots USA. That's also on Facebook. You can look it up and find it, We The Patriots USA, and our website is almost ready to be up and running. It's still being designed, because we're such a new group. We only formed on July 4th of this year. So on the 244th anniversary birthday, I should say, of our country, we formed it this year because, anyone who's paying attention has to see that we are at a crossroads in America right now. I don't know if we've had a time like this in the last 150 years since the Civil War. And also going back to the revolutionary times. It just seems that there is such a groundswell on both sides, whether you're, obviously with the Black Lives Matter crowd and what Antifa is doing, or whether you're true patriots like us and like you, Ricky, who want to take this country back and who realize what this country was founded on. This country was not founded on racism. All right, that's a false narrative. This country was founded on freedom, This country was founded on the proposition that every person, all men are created equal. Men, not meaning just men. Every man, every woman is created equal. Okay? That's what this country was founded on. And it's just being distorted. They're trying to rewrite history, and we're pushing back against that. So We the Patriots is to take this country back and to, bring some sanity back to our country. And it's just every time you turn on the news, every time you go on Twitter, whatever news sources you follow, I'm sure you follow a lot of them. There's just so much chaos right now. And, we are the counter chaos. We are the counter cancel culture. We want to cancel culture. That's one of the hashtags we're trying to get going right now. So we want to take this on at a national level. We're organizing with different groups throughout the country. So what we are basically creating is a network, is a web of all of the different freedom fighting organizations across the country. We're reaching out to them. We're forming partnerships with them so that we will have basically a conglomerate of organizations. Why try to reinvent the wheel and try to, drum up members, which will take years and years and years, when these other organizations already have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of members. And if we link them all together, we can have one huge organization that can take things on from a legal standpoint. There's a lot of litigation that has to happen. I'll talk about that in a little bit. From a legislative standpoint in Congress, getting down into Congress, and also taking it to the streets with our rallies, but on a much, much larger level. You saw what happened in Berlin. Was it last week, I think? Or I think it's Sunday, so it's a new week. So it was the week before last, where they had 1 million people there marching. And that's the kind of thing we're going to do here. All right. These little rallies of 200 or 300 people, that's not catching anyone's attention. Obviously, this is a very important election year. This is the most important election of our lives. I know we said that 4 years ago, but we're going to say that again this year. So, and we're not a political organization. We're not a partisan, but we are a freedom-loving organization. We believe in independence and in individual rights, and in the Constitution, the principles that this country was founded upon. So you mentioned the mask lawsuit. So I don't know if you want to get into that, or if you want to ask me if you have any more questions about our new organization.
No, continue. Yeah. Well, let's get into the mask thing.
Okay. So the mask lawsuit is in Connecticut, but it will have far-reaching, if we're successful, we do believe it will have far-reaching influences beyond just Connecticut, because it's looking at the issue of education, and many states have education as a constitutional right. So in Connecticut's one of those states that has it in its constitution, in Article 8 of the Connecticut Constitution, that there shall always be public schools open to all children in the state. And that has been interpreted by the Connecticut Supreme Court to mean that education is a fundamental right. And Chef V. O'Neill in 1996, the Connecticut Supreme Court said that education is a fundamental right in Connecticut. So that those words, fundamental right, are very, very important from a legal standpoint, because once something is a fundamental right, like freedom of speech, like free exercise of religion, freedom of assembly, all of those things are fundamental rights in the Constitution. Once you call something a fundamental right, it deserves the greatest level, and it can only be taken away or only be infringed upon if there is a compelling government interest, and the interest is being achieved by the least restrictive. So it subjects it to that kind of strict scrutiny that you don't get with lesser rights that are not fundamental rights. So because education is a fundamental right, and because they are placing a burden upon education by forcing every child to wear a mask or they cannot attend school, that's placing a restriction on a fundamental right. They have to show there's a compelling interest, and they're doing it in the least restrictive means possible. So the Commissioner of Education, Miguel Cardona, came out at the end of June 30th, I believe it was, if not July 1st, either June 30th, July 1st, came out with, I believe it was called Advance, Adapt, Achieve. And it's a 50-page publication. It's guidelines for schools reopening. However, in those guidelines, the State Department of Education stated that all students are required to wear masks. So on the one hand, he calls them guidelines. On the other hand, within it says these are requirements that the state is requiring you to do this. Well, once the state is requiring you to do something, it has to have some authority, right? You can't just say you're required to do something with no authority. Well, there's no number one, executive orders aren't law anyway, but there was no executive order that required this. There was no statute that required this. There was no regulation that required this. He didn't issue these pursuant to any rulemaking or regulatory authority, because in order for a state agency to enact a regulation, you have to go through a very specific process, which means you have to basically petition the legislature. You have to go to the legislative review committee of the state legislature, the regulatory committee. There's a regulatory review committee that you have to go to and present these proposed regulations to. You can't just make regulations on your own. You also have to allow a public comment period when you're making regulations. You have to allow the public to give input. That didn't happen here. And Cardona is not even saying that these are regulations. He's not calling these regulations. He's just calling them guidelines and requirements, whatever that means. So there's no legal authority for him to do this. That's number one. Number two, it's infringing upon a basic constitutional right because you're limiting access to education. You're saying you cannot attend school if you're not wearing a mask. Now, will there be distance learning offered as an alternative? In some schools, perhaps. But even that is not giving full and equal access to education, because if other children who are wearing masks are being allowed to attend in person, which we know is much more preferable to be with other students in a social environment and be with your teachers in person. We know, educators can tell you that. It's very, very clear. Then they are being given greater protection under the law than those who are being excluded and have to learn at home through a computer. So that's a violation of the Equal Protection Clause as well, of the Constitution. Of the federal and state constitutions have equal protection clause that all persons shall be afforded equal protection under the laws. The 14th Amendment in the U.S. Constitution, and it's also in the Connecticut Constitution. So you have to every person is entitled to equal protection. So you're not getting equal protection if some students can only learn at home and some students are allowed to come in person simply because they're putting a mask on their face. And then there's also the religious argument. There are Christians who believe that mask wearing is a sin, is evil, because if anyone has studied satanic rituals, you know that mask wearing is an integral part of satanic rituals. Okay? And I don't want to get too far afield into that, but some people do have a legitimate religious objection as well to wearing masks. So now you're infringing upon religious freedom if you're forcing people to wear masks. As you said, this is all tied together with the vaccine issue. It's very, very clear what they're trying to do is the people in charge are trying to create a situation so untenable, so uncomfortable, that when a vaccine is rolled out, everyone will be racing to get the vaccine and roll up their sleeves because they just want to go back to normal. They want to be able to rip off their mask and go back to normal. They don't like what we're doing with this lawsuit because that screws up that whole plan. Because if we can get a court to say, no, you don't have to wear masks and you can go back to normal now without a vaccine, well, their whole agenda crumbles then at that point. So that's why this mask lawsuit is so important. It actually is going to be filed this week. The initial papers haven't been filed yet, but it's being filed this week. We were set back. It was supposed to be filed last week, but all of us, including our attorney, got knocked out of power and internet for the last 5-6 days. So unfortunately, that set everything back, but it is going to be filed this week. And we do need support, though. This is very, very expensive. The attorney representing us is attorney Doug Dubitsky. He is not only an attorney, but he is a state legislator in Connecticut, which is awesome. He has a lot of experience with these kinds of constitutional civil rights issues. And he's going to be working in conjunction with another state legislator, actually, attorney Craig Fishbein, who's also a state legislator. They're going to be working together on the case. But Doug is going to be our lead counsel. Unfortunately, he's not free. The initial retainer is $20,000. In this case, is expected to cost anywhere between $40,000 and $50,000. And we're just, at this point, all we're seeking is a temporary restraining order to have the court. And what that means is the court basically puts a stay in place and says, while the litigation is pending, because litigation can take a year, 2 years. I mean, this can play out for a long time. But if you get that initial temporary restraining order, what that will say is while this litigation is pending a final outcome, you cannot put this mask requirement into place. And so that would at least stop it while this plays out. And that in and of itself would be a huge victory. So that's what we're seeking to do initially. We have a fundraiser both on Facebook. If you go to the Connecticut Freedom Alliance Facebook group, as well as in the Connecticut School Mask Lawsuit Group, we've created another Facebook group specifically for this lawsuit called the Connecticut School Mask Lawsuit Group. And if you look that up, CT School Mask Lawsuit, you will find the fundraiser there as well. And we also have GoFundMe for those that don't want to give Facebook a cut, and I can totally sympathize with that. I'm not a fan of Mr. Zuckerberg myself. We have been horribly censored. As a matter of fact, 2 weeks ago, our We The Patriots group, the new group, was deleted, and we had our assistant. We have an administrative assistant that works with us. She reached out to Facebook and contacted them, and thank God was successful in getting them to reinstate us. But we were actually completely taken down because they say that we have, quote, misinformation being spread, false news, as they say, which is code word for meaning truth, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's it's funny because right before this whole COVID-19 thing, the biggest, I remember telling myself like, the biggest issue was vaccines and what was going on, and the fight was really heating up, and then all of a sudden COVID-19 got everybody's attention, and then it didn't take long before I realized, oh crap, this is the same fight. Like we're fighting the same people, and it's the same agenda being pushed. And it's this week a lot of parents just found out what their schools are doing for their kids or whatnot. In Massachusetts, a lot of friends of mine in the towns they live in, other towns surrounding where I live in Ludlow, Massachusetts, they're doing completely remote learning. Our town just decided Friday. They were supposed to decide earlier in the week, but the storm kind of messed up a lot of things here too. So they just decided Friday that you can do the hybrid thing, but you have to wear a mask if you go to school. I mean, there's a lot of parents that are coming together and looking for alternative solutions. There's a lot of parents that, I know people firsthand that are saying, I'm not sending my kids to school. And what I'll do is a couple days a week, we'll get a bunch of parents together. We'll get a bunch of kids together. They'll still have that social environment that some parents feel is necessary. And they can, we can do things together, do little, paint together, draw together, do little activities together, and kind of bring people together. And that's nice to see. It's nice to see that people are being proactive. People are instead of just kind of saying, well, these are my options, let me just, do what they tell me. They're actually looking for solutions and alternatives. So I think that's awesome. What you guys are doing is great, because I mean the mask thing has become so politicized, and I mean just about everything has become politicized, and so much of this, I mean even the hydroxychloroquine, which has become like either you like Trump or don't like Trump thing, that affects your opinion on that drug. And as you know, I'm just like yourself. I'm the furthest thing from suggesting, from a person who suggests any drug to anybody. I mean, I'm all about homeopathic, methods, functional medicine, eat good, organic, exercise, vitamin D, go outside in the sun, fresh air. That's the lifestyle that I always promote and I tell people about. The only reason hydroxychloroquine has become a passionate issue to me is because it's a big pharma issue, and big pharma is the one who is basically pushing to demonize this generic drug that's really cheap and been around forever. And yeah, does it have some side effects? It does. So does just about every drug that's FDA approved. But if the FDA approved it and it's been used for this long, and now all of a sudden they're demonizing it, what does it tell you about the FDA approval process? Another thing that people aren't taking consideration is the fact that if there is another treatment for something, and this is, I haven't looked into this fully, but I've seen a couple sources reporting the same thing, that if you don't have another treatment for some issue, from some disease or virus, you can actually fast track a vaccine. But if the medical world decided that hydroxychloroquine was a alternative or a method that could work for treating COVID-19, that would remove the ability for them to fast track a vaccine, because I guess that's one of the guidelines. So
absolutely, you're 100% correct. You're 100% correct on that. And not only that, it's not just being touted as a treatment. It's being touted as a cure, and there is substantial evidence that it is a cure. Okay, and again, I'm not a physician. I'm not giving medical advice, just to put that disclaimer out there. These 9 doctors that stood up in front of the Supreme Court of D.C. 2 weeks ago and that were demonized and banned from all social media, they were speaking the truth. They were speaking the truth that they've seen their patients cured, and if they're treated with hydroxychloroquine, zinc, and Zithromax from the beginning in the early stages, that they'll be completely cured, and even after they're sick, they've been able to cure people. If there's a cure, what the hell do you need a vaccine for? Okay, you don't, because you don't need to prevent it. If you get it, you'll just take this treatment and you'll be fine. So you don't need a vaccine. You don't need to risk all the side effects of a vaccine. And yes, there are side effects of those drugs too. I get it. But you don't need the vaccine, and you certainly need to fast track it, as you're saying. So you are 100% on the money there, literally, because it's all about money. Okay, there are billions and actually trillions, as the years go on, of dollars at stake for a COVID-19 vaccine, and they just don't want anything that's going to interrupt that, because it's all about money. It's not about public health. Pharmaceutical company, the FDA, the government, they do not care about public health. It is all about money. And these politicians are in bed with the pharmaceutical executives. Okay. And that is the only reason why they are pushing this vaccine so hard. And they want to mandate COVID-19 vaccine. I don't know if you saw, Ricky, but this past week there was an opinion piece in USA Today that was calling for universal COVID-19 vaccine mandates for every man, woman, and child. There should be no religious exemptions, no philosophical exemptions, only medical exemptions, and only in very strict circumstances. But basically, they are calling for these doctors, and there was a lawyer, all from Case Western University, put out an opinion piece this week saying this is why we need a COVID-19 mandate. And you should be able, and for anything, to get a job, to get a driver's license, to be able to enter a place of business, you should have to show your papers. That's what they're literally saying. They're saying, we know that sounds draconian, we know that sounds bad, but this is why it's actually patriotic that everybody be mandated to get a vaccine. This is scary. And we're actually planning on doing a show this coming week. I don't have a date set yet. It's either going to be probably Thursday or Friday evening in our group. So watch for the announcements in our Facebook group. We're going to do a roundtable discussion in response to that article and talk about the medical, ethical, and legal problems with trying to mandate a COVID-19 vaccine. So please watch for that. We're going to stream that also on We The Patriots. So it'll be both We The Patriots and Connecticut Freedom Alliance. And we'll put posts up advertising that with a flyer. Hopefully by tomorrow, we'll have that all set, and we'll have all the speakers lined up. But we're going to have some really dynamic speakers, and just stay tuned for that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, and we've said this over and over again, the fact that people think these pharmaceutical companies actually care about our health is insanity. I mean, you look at everything from like Bayer selling, what was it, the drug that had was tainted with HIV. You look at a Vioxx, all the research that they knew firsthand. Merck knew, they had research that Vioxx was killing people, and they suppressed it, and people still died. I mean, it's example after example that the only thing they really care about isn't your health, it's profit. And yet when vaccines come around, when that discussion comes around, then all of a sudden people think like these are moral companies, and it's bothersome. And like you said, the FDA, everybody's in bed together. I mean, it's the good thing, the positive aspect of all this COVID conversation and all the things that have been going on in the last, since 2020, is the fact that people are becoming much more aware of this conversation. They're becoming at least more skeptical, it seems, of vaccines. So even though you're starting to see a push, a greater push maybe from the government, people are discussing mandatory vaccines and all this stuff, and you're getting some people that are saying what you mentioned, Brian, like, oh, can we just get this vaccine so we can go back to normal life? I'm also hearing people say, hey, can Joe Biden just win just so we can go back to normal life? Because everybody just seems to be aware of how political all this is and how much of this is just politically motivated. And but we can't say those things, because if we think like that, then they've won, we've lost. I mean, if we truly,
Joe Biden winning would be anything but going back to normal life.
yeah, no, I agree 100. That's been my argument.
First of all, Joe Biden wouldn't be Joe Biden winning. It would be his vice president winning, whoever's the nominee, because he's not going to kind of maintain the presidency. I think that much is clear to anybody who's watching from his basement. But I will say this, and by the way, he's not going to stop. They've already seen how much they can control us with the masks, and with this misinformation about the COVID-19. Listen, I'm not saying it's not real. I'm not here to say the virus is a hoax. I actually believe it's a bioweapon from China. I've been saying that from the beginning. I believe there's another version of it coming out. They screwed up and released this too early, to the point where it's not as harmful as they actually wanted it to be. That's what I firmly believe, as does Don, that there is another wave that's going to be coming, but it's not a wave of the same virus. It's bioengineered, and they're going to release something even more deadly. I'm not saying this to scare people. I'm just saying that this is part of their agenda. President Trump, and again, I'm not here to be political. I'm not here to be an advocate for President Trump, but I call balls and strikes, Ricky. All right. I'm just calling it like I see it. And President Trump has upset the apple cart, has torn down structures that have been in place for so long in Washington. And he's been doing that. He's been bucking the trend, going against convention and attacking the deep state. And they are so threatened by that they will do anything. They will do anything, including shutting down the economy, having millions upon millions of people lose their livelihoods, lose their businesses, have people starving because of it, and have people dying because of this virus, because there may be evidence, and again, I don't have evidence right now, but don't be surprised if Trump wins a second term that there's evidence that comes out that the Democrats were colluding with China on this coronavirus. They hate the president that much. They would rather see people die by the millions than see him get reelected. Okay, so the last thing we need is Joe Biden in office to return to normal, because it's all about ultimate power, totalitarian power and control of this country. And they are going to mandate COVID-19 vaccines and flu vaccines, because that's the other one that's being talked about, for every man, woman, and child, for you to participate in any aspect of society. There's also, I'm sure you're aware of a lot of the information that's come out with regard to Bill Gates and his role in this, with microchipping and the vaccines.
I can't recommend people checking out James Corbett's documentary on Bill Gates more and more. I mean, that documentary, he went so deep, and he, all the stuff you hear Bill Gates all over, in the conspiracy theorists or alternative media world, you hear people discuss him. But when you really get a good researcher, a thorough researcher like James Corbett, to really see how much influence he really has on everything that's going on in the world, it's scary. It's scary how much influence he has. The other thing that's super scary is how people will demonize, a doctor that's on the front lines that does a press conference and says that she's helping people. She's helped 300 plus patients with this remedy or that remedy or this cocktail of things. And people say, oh, well, she's crazy because of this, or because, whatever reason they come up with to justify discrediting her. And then Bill Gates, who has never practiced medicine, can go on TV and is asked to come on to give his opinion on shows on what's going on medically in the world and his medical advice and opinion. It's like, what do people not see what the hell's going on? Why is somebody with a PhD, why would somebody who actually practices medicine, why is that person being demonized? And why is this person who has never practiced medicine, has no background in medicine, their opinion is valid? And it's obvious, because it's all a matter of what side you're on. If you're pushing the agenda that they want you to push, then you're valid. And then they'll have you on and you can discuss what your perspectives are. But if you go against the grain, if you say it, they'll just try to discredit you. And you saw it with the pandemic documentary. What happened to Dr. Judy. I mean, how they pulled down the website. They locked her Wikipedia page. They just do such a great job, because all the tech companies are on the same team and they're pushing the same agendas, that they all come together and they can control the narrative. And that's what happened with the documentary. That's what happened with a lot of different things, where they'll just, only things you can Google, the only things that come up in the search engines are stuff that is pushing the same narrative. So you're hearing people say, oh, that's been debunked, or this has been debunked, and that's been debunked. And it's like, from where? What are you talking about? And it's getting harder and harder for people to get alternative voices and alternative researchers. I think, I just had Ben Swan on my show on the last episode, and he keeps saying that, like, he thinks they overplay their cards. And I think he's kind of right, because a lot of people who are now becoming much more aware of how belligerently obvious the censorship is, they're starting to think to themselves, okay, is this really about protecting the public, or is this really about, just discrediting and silencing the other perspectives and these other voices? So, if you let somebody like Del Bigtree be on YouTube, then it's like, okay, he says some things, maybe some people disagree with his perspective on things, so maybe they don't. But once you completely pull him off YouTube and you're making it impossible for anybody who has that similar type of perspective to share their thoughts, then even maybe the person, the most normal person, in regards to, like, just kind of believing whatever the mainstream media tells you, even they have to stop and think, like, okay, why are they making such an effort to just not even to censor somebody who is, I mean, I get it. I could even justify it. I could find a way to justify it if you're censoring somebody who is promoting violence or promoting something like that. But if you're just censoring opinions, just people with second opinions, and I say this all the time, and people have heard me repeat this over and over again, doctors don't agree with each other all the time. That happens all the time. That's why people get second opinions on stuff. It happens all the time. They both study medicine. They both have PhDs. They both have been, could be experts in the same medical field, but could have completely, drastically different opinions. And we have accepted that throughout our lives. But now, all of a sudden, like, if a doctor has a different opinion, then it's like, no, we're deciding what truth is, and this doctor is agrees with our opinion, so that's the only opinion that is valid, and we're letting you listen to. So, I mean, it's so obvious, and it's so frustrating, because people like yourself and people like myself, all we're saying is, like, let people get all the information and let them decide for themselves. Like,
Exactly.
that's it.
You know what? I'm gonna quote. I'm gonna quote John Lennon. I'm gonna sort of paraphrase. All we are saying is give truth a chance. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what this is about. I want to start that as the new mantra too. It's not about, Ricky. It's not about the authority of the evidence for the people in control and the people largely on the left. It's not about the authority of the evidence or of facts or of science. It's about the authority of the person. And that's the problem. It's who's saying it, what agency is saying it. That's what makes it valid to them. So even if I can present dozens upon dozens of peer-reviewed studies from reputable medical journals saying that there are safety risks with certain vaccines, with saying that there are safety risks with mask wearing even, or that masks do not prevent the spread of coronavirus. Even if I can show, and I can provide you with, anyone who wants to reach out to me, I can provide you with dozens of studies that say that. If the CDC doesn't say it, it's not true. That's what the mainstream media promotes, this false narrative that, again, it's the authorities. So Paul Offit can get on NBC Nightly News and say that vaccines are safe and effective, and there's never been any studies proving that they have any harm, that they cause any harm. Okay, he can get up there and say that, and nobody will question him. You'll never hear a news anchor follow up with a second question, which is the obvious question. Well, what are the studies proving that they're safe and effective? Do you have any studies proving that they're safe? He'll say there are dozens. He'll say there's never been a study proving there's no harm. And he'll also say that he'll even say there are hundreds. He'll say there are hundreds or thousands of studies that have proven that vaccines don't cause autism, or thousands of studies that prove that vaccines are safe and effective. But you'll never hear the news anchor ask the follow-up question, which is again the obvious one. Well, where are the studies? Can you cite just one for me? Because they know that he doesn't have them. But they'll never ask him. And yet we'll go on, one of us or one of our doctors who is again speaking truth, that we're friends with, will go to the media and try to present studies, say, look, I've got a whole pile of studies for you. And they won't, it'll be crickets. They won't give him any airtime. They won't listen to him, even though he has the evidence, he's willing to produce it. But because, again, Paul Offit or the director of the CDC says something, or the director of the FDA says something, those people are given credence because it's the authority of the person, not the authority of the evidence. With regard to censorship, from the beginning, our founding principle at the Connecticut Freedom Alliance is that we will never censor unless it's, like you said, threats of violence, hate speech, something like that, something that's really extreme. Yes, we would take it down. But since we started, we have held true to that principle. We have never censored anyone, even people that don't agree with us. Because there are some people in our group, and people call them trolls. I don't necessarily use that word very often because they're not, if they have a contrary view or if they're not woke, they may be ignorant, but it doesn't mean they're a troll. And there may be some trolls too. But regardless of that, we allow everyone to post anything. But very quickly, if somebody is posting, free speech takes care of itself. So if somebody posts something that we know is not true and that seems to be coming from a quote unquote troll, it's very quickly that you'll get hundreds of comments pouring in with the alternative viewpoint. And that takes care of itself. So that's why we've never had to remove a post. We've never had to remove a member from our group because we hold true to the principles of the First Amendment, namely free speech. And we even had someone very early on in our group, very early on in the life of our group, come in and say that this group is horrible. This group is, they called it mutinous because there are other established groups in Connecticut. And so to have this group pop up is disrespectful to the work of the other groups. And everybody should leave this group instantly. This Connecticut Freedom Alliance is horrible. Everybody should leave. We left that post up. Most other groups would never have approved. We don't have a post approval process. We let anybody post what they want. Most other groups would have taken that down in 5 seconds once they saw that. They're bad mouthing this group. We can't keep that post up. But no, we even allow someone who directly attacks us and says this group is horrible, everybody should leave. We allow that post up. Within 24 hours, there are 178 comments, and only 2 of them were supporting this person, and all the rest of them, the other 176 comments, were in favor of us and saying what a great job we're doing. So free speech takes care of itself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I mean, trolls do exist. I remember years ago. This was like probably the first year I started the podcast, and whatever year it was, like 6-7 years ago. And I had Dr. Brzezinski on, and if anybody ever watched any of his documentaries, they'd know all about like just the paid trolls that will go everywhere where anybody speaks of him in a positive light and just say that he's pseudoscience and he's this and he's that. And at the time, it was like episode 13 of the Ripple Effect podcast. I didn't even have any type of real listenership or any real influence, or I was barely a influencer to say the least, and yet I was getting trolls left and right. And I was just excited that somebody cared that much because it was only episode 13. I'm like, wow, people actually care about who I'm talking to. But it was obvious that it was all just like, I remember just tweeting or putting on Facebook or somewhere that, hey, Dr. Brzezinski's coming on the show, and like immediately started getting people just say, hey, he's pseudoscience, he kills people, he's, all this stuff. And I'm just like, wow, man, this is firsthand just showing that, and these must be people who just pay attention to everything he does and just goes around to discredit him. And so, stuff like this has been going on forever. And
right.
all we ask is like, look at all perspectives, like get all the information. That's 99% of the time, that's all I'm saying. I'm saying it's not fair that somebody has decided what truth is, they're force feeding you their perspectives, and they're saying that the other perspective is too dangerous for you to even look at and decide for yourself. And to me, nothing proves that it's more, that whole thing is bullshit more than the pandemic documentary, because what they were doing was they were letting people post the documentary on YouTube as long as you were giving some debunking narrative with it, as long as you were posting it because you were discrediting it, or you were speaking poorly of it, or in some way where it was trying to tell people it's a hoax or it's been debunked, then you can literally put up a YouTube video showing the documentary in parts and pieces, and while you discredit it, but yet it's too dangerous for people to watch by itself and let people make their own decisions. So only when it's influenced by somebody else for the purpose of saying that it's been discredited or debunked or whatnot. So it wasn't about the documentary being dangerous. It was about the fact that they just didn't want you to look at it and come up with your own conclusions. And when you see people come together like that, the same way, and again, I have a love-hate relationship with Alex Jones. Sometimes I think he does some good for, alternative media and for, getting some good information out there. And other times I think he harms the movement. But either way, like, everybody should agree he should have a voice. Same thing with David Icke. He should have a voice. Like, agree with them or don't agree with them. He should have a voice. Listen to his perspectives. These people aren't, they're not promoting violence. They're promoting ideas. And if you disagree with them, that's great.
Right.
But, it's a huge issue when you're saying that, hey, you're too dumb to decide for yourself, so we're going to tell you what. And the other thing, too, is that how many freaking times has mainstream media been caught lying and been caught, look at a Lancet study that they used to discredit Trump and his opinion on hydroxychloroquine, and then all of a sudden it gets retracted, and nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about, any of that stuff. So it's like, it's so obvious that the media has an agenda. They push things for whatever that agenda is, and when they get caught lying, when they get caught misleading, they don't get pulled off YouTube. They don't get pulled off Facebook. They don't. So it's like this whole COVID-19 thing. It's never been. I mean, it's like we all knew it, but now it's become so blatantly obvious that they have an agenda, and then the people who still believe this nonsense, they're just politically motivated. It's all because so many people are, have a opinion on hydroxychloroquine or vaccines or anything else, or masks wearing. Their opinions strictly based on their political views. Like, you could, wearing a mask might as well be like a Joe Biden, a flyer. It's like it's just you basically are people are arguing with each other about wearing masks, not because anybody actually knows or can regurgitate any science that proves that it's actually helping the spread of this virus, but it's all because of your political view. It's because Trump was more lenient with mask wearing, so I'm gonna be for mask wearing. I'm gonna be to make a point, because all these people on the other political party, they're not taking this seriously enough, and all this other stuff. Even though the tests are giving false positives, even though the CDC website itself says that when you do test positive, even if it's not a false positive, if you do test positive, there's no way of them knowing if it's just one of the many coronaviruses in the coronavirus family, or if it's the specific one that causes COVID-19. We have, story and story of people waiting in line to get tested, never getting tested, getting out because they're waiting too long, and then next thing you know, they're getting positive test results in the mail. Story and story. I mean, just here locally, that we had, I think it was Amherst that that reported a Mass Live that their numbers were completely, just blown out of proportion. The state misrepresented their numbers. So we have all these pieces of evidence to prove that the numbers can't be trusted, that you can't make decisions based on these numbers, and yet they just report on the mainstream news the cases are going up, the numbers are going up, the cases are going up. They don't tell you that the average age is 78. They don't tell you that the majority of deaths have been in nursing homes. And this is just completely ignoring the fact that a lot of people who are dying aren't even dying because of the virus, or they might have had it. They might have. I'm hearing in Europe. I forget where. I was just reading an article this morning of people. What they were doing, and I forget which European country, where they're going back and they're recounting things, because what they were doing was, if you tested positive and then like months later you die of some other thing, they're counting that as a COVID death, just because you have. So if you die at all for any reason at any time, and at some point in your life you tested positive for it, then they're counting it as a COVID death. I mean, you story and story of this stuff going on.
I thought actually in Great Britain. I could be mistaken, but
Oh, I think you're
thought
right.
it was.
It might have
I
been.
thought it was in the UK. Yeah, yeah. But no, it's crazy. Well, even President Trump said, he said, we're testing more than we ever have before. We're testing more than any country in the world. So obviously the cases are going to go up, especially with all the false positives, right? So obviously, if you're doing more testing, I saw a great meme about a month ago on Facebook about that said, if yes, of course, coronavirus positives are going up. If we gave IQ tests out to every person in the country, the number of morons would go up to. everybody, so everybody's taking a COVID test, and yeah, you're going to have more positives, right? And especially when there's false positives. But it's so stupid, and it's actually dangerous. Some of these tests are contaminated, all right, and that's already been proven. Some of these tests are contaminated with COVID. Some of these tests can actually cause physical harm. I actually know someone my wife knows actually, who had to take a coronavirus test for work. Was didn't have to, but was strongly encouraged that because this person's a healthcare worker, that everybody should be tested, and so she took it, and she ended up having an uncontrollable nosebleed because it actually punctured an artery up in the top of her nose. There's an artery up there. It punctured it. She had to get emergency surgery because of that. So now that's workers' comp, in my opinion. that's waiting to, if your employer is telling you to do something, you do it because of what your employer directed you to do, or suggested or encouraged you to do. To me, that's a workers' comp case waiting to be filed. But this person now has to be out of work for 4 weeks or whatever it is because of this COVID test. The COVID test itself caused a physical harm because they stick that nasal swab test goes all the way up to the top of your nose to your brain almost. It's really, really dangerous. So people aren't talking about that. And for what? For a virus that's no more deadly than the seasonal flu. Okay? It isn't. And anyone that tells you it is lying. All right? It's a false narrative, and there's no reason to be locking down the economy. If you look at the number of deaths worldwide from strep last year, if you look at the number of deaths worldwide from the seasonal flu, from all of these other viruses and even bacteria and illnesses, there's way more deaths worldwide from a lot of other communicable diseases that have never been hyped like this before. Why? Because Donald Trump wasn't in office. It does come back down to politics. It has been politicized. You're absolutely right, Ricky. He wasn't in office, and so they did not have to create this pandemic to make it seem like the world has never been as bad as it is now, and it's all because of Donald Trump. That's what it's about.
Well, you look at it, it's quite obvious that they have to keep this whole coronavirus scare going for the purpose of not opening the polls, because it makes it easier for them to fudge the numbers. And it's quite obvious that's what's going on. I mean, you see it over and over again. Everybody's talking about cases. Nobody's talking about deaths. So it's like, okay, so you're finding well, guess what? Like, the majority of people have HPV. Does that mean what? Does that mean that we should stop the world until we completely eliminate HPV? Like, if people aren't dying from it, or at least people aren't dying from it to a extreme compared to other viruses that have killed people throughout, the human, since civilization started, then what are we doing? Like, we're just saying that, oh, we can't have this virus in our society. It can't be a part of anything. Like, viruses have always been a part of being alive. You're going to be exposed to viruses. Some people are going to die from some viruses that do absolutely nothing to other people. You see asymptomatic. I mean, like Del Bigtree, I think, said during an episode, asymptomatic means you're healthy. Like, in many cases, that's what it means. It means that you have a strong immune system, and a virus that could be harmful to one person could have very little effect on somebody who's healthier and has a strong immune system. So it's quite obvious that, like, they just keep sharing these numbers, and even like News 22 locally on their Facebook page, they keep posting stuff. They were posting numbers every week, and they would always add like probable, I think it was probable cases and confirmed cases, and I'm like, why why are they giving you a total number with probable cases in that number? Like, you can't trust any of this stuff. So people who, oh, we just have to do this, and it's like, first it's like we just have to flatten the curve, then you flatten the curve. Well, now we just have to wear masks. Now we just have to do this. Now we just have to be shut down for a little longer. Now it's like, it's like, oh, if we were just shut down, if everybody just shut down for like 4 weeks or 2 weeks or whatever number they come up with, then everything will be better. And it's like, well, will it? Because then that will happen, and then they'll say, oh, well, it's because some people left the house, or because of some of the protesting, or maybe it was because of this or because of that. It's like,
Oh,
hey,
no. Only certain protests, though.
well,
Only
good point,
certain.
yeah.
It's the freedom fighting protests, reopen the economy protests. Those are the dangers. Black Lives Matter doesn't spread the virus. You know that, right?
Well, you saw the Fauci, right? You saw Fauci getting questioned that, and him tiptoeing
Yeah.
around the topic. It's like, could it be any more obvious that this guy he like,
Yeah, He's
people
telling people it's okay. He's telling people it's okay to hook up with strangers on Tinder. All right, but it's not okay for us to reopen the economy, to reopen all these businesses, for us to protest again for freedom, for us to gather in public spaces like that without a mask. Okay, but you can go have sex with a stranger. I mean, this guy is. I mean, he's so far out there, and anyone that can't see this is just blind that he is just political. He's not even a doctor anymore. I don't even consider him a doctor. All right, because he's not saying, and none of his recommendations are coming from a medical standpoint, from medical experience, medical knowledge. It's all a political agenda. That's what his recommendations are. They're based on politics. Okay, that's all they're based on. I'm very, very glad the president has distanced himself from him, even though when he's put on the spot about it, he'll say, oh, no, we still talk and we're still friends and everything. But it's very clear that relationship has soured and he's distanced himself from him. And I'm very, very happy about that. I think a lot, again, November 4th, you're going to see a lot of things change. All right, if the president wins. Even if he doesn't win, you'll see a lot of things change. But this is all about the election. And, a lot of this, if the president is able to win, you'll see a lot of the lies about this virus, about this pandemic, will be exposed. I think it's going to be amazing, the information that's going to come out. But right now, obviously, he has to be careful because we're very close. We're only 3 months away from the election now. Okay, a little less than 3 months. So he has to be very careful about that. But I think you're going to see a lot of information come out. You didn't need to shut down the economy for this. You didn't need to shut down schools. There's no reason why you can't vote in person. All this mail-in balloting stuff is just a means of voter fraud. And we actually have protested against that as well at the Freedom Alliance. We had a protest because they had a special session, and one of the items on the agenda was mail-in ballots. Unfortunately, it did pass, but we had a protest about that last month. So it's very obvious, if you can stand in line at Walmart, or if you can stand in line at the liquor store, you can stand in line at the polling places to vote. There's no reason you can't vote. If you're legitimately ill, so ill that you can't leave the house, okay, that's an exception. Or if you're deployed, you're in the military, you're away, you're out of state, okay, those are legitimate absentee ballots. I'm fine with that. But a perfectly healthy person that is just afraid of COVID, that just went down to the liquor store to buy, beer or wine, but now they're saying they're too afraid to go to stand at the polls. That's just BS. You know what I mean? It's obvious that the motivation is voter fraud. And we've had our own members say that they've received duplicate ballots in the mail, or that they've received ballots for people that don't live there anymore, or deceased voters, that they're sending out ballots for all of these people that aren't active voters, or multiple ballots for the same person. So this is obvious that the reason behind it is they want to rig the election. It's voter fraud. It has nothing to do with COVID or public health.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I've heard stories from many people of that, people who lived in 3 different places getting cards at all those locations, even if they haven't lived there for like 10 years. It's crazy. I mean, it's so obvious that they're trying to mess around with the elections. And like you said, like, if people can go to a grocery store, and this isn't about left versus right or whatever it may be, like, regardless who you're voting for, you should want the election to be as honest and as legit as possible. So it's not about just a Trump thing. I mean, the Republicans could easily fudge the numbers too if they do it. I mean, it's all about just having a fair
Right.
election. So it's having a mail-in ballot. I mean, it's such nonsense. Especially when, like you said, some schools are doing hybrids. So I mean, they are
Right.
going to be able to go to school. The crazy thing is, like, Italy, which is one of the hot spots, completely open up their schools, no plexiglass, no mask wearing, none of that, and yet, like, nobody's talking about that. Like, everything that they say is too dangerous to do. Once they do it, we find out that, like, oh, they're full of shit. Because you look at, like, soccer, for example. The first soccer league that started after the lockdown was the Bundesliga, which is the German league. And when they first started, like, you could tell the players, the announcers, everybody felt uncertain because you've been just, I mean, for months you're just being sold as BS about, like, how dangerous things are and how quickly it spreads, and then also just all the conflicting opinions. So all the uncertainty adds to people being scared. And then they play, and, like, the first time somebody scores a goal, they're not even touching each other. They're not celebrating. They're actually just clapping near each other. And, like, every week that goes by, that nothing happens. They go closer to normal. Where, like, now players score a goal, they're jumping on each other and celebrating like they did before. And, like, so every time things get closer to normal, and you realize, like, nothing happened. Like, where's all the deaths? Where all the things, the bad things that were going to happen if we didn't social distance and we didn't lock down and we didn't whatever? Like, like, none of it happens. And it's the same thing would happen to schools. Like, if we open the schools, guess what? Nothing would happen. Like, yeah, some people are going to die of a virus, regardless what virus it is, because that's what happens all the time. People are like, I feel like people were naive to the fact that when they were going ahead with their everyday routine, people were fucking dying. Like, people, that's not
Yep.
new. Like, people were dying.
Yeah.
If you
But
worked
it
at a
wasn't reported. It wasn't reported. If it doesn't
exactly.
come out of the TV, it didn't happen. So if it's not reported on the nightly news, on cable news, CNN, MSNBC, if people don't see it there, that it's horrible and people are dropping like flies all around you, then they aren't. Then they're just in some fantasy world and everybody's healthy and nobody's dying, even though we know that's not the truth. Nobody wore a mask for the flu, all right, even though there were tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands dying worldwide every year from the flu, but nobody was wearing it because the TV didn't tell them to.
And what's
Okay,
frustrating is
so
that the flu kills kids. The flu, and that didn't
yes,
have any effect on our school systems.
way
And
more
yet,
than coronavirus does. Yeah, way more than coronavirus.
yeah. So I mean, it's frustrating because it's like the flu actually kills young kids. I mean, that you're talking about nursing homes are the majority of the deaths in America. You're talking about average age is 78, and yet you're gonna mandate kids to wear masks. And there's a lot of good, I guess a good argument to be made that wearing one could even be unsafe because one, you're touching your face more. You're not breathing in fresh oxygen. You're breathing in what you're breathing out. It's like there's
There's the propensity for mold, mildew to accumulate, especially because a lot of these fabric masks, they get moist from the breath.
oh, good point.
And you
Yeah.
keep wearing that over and over and over again, you can get respiratory infections. Oh yeah, there's a lot of science behind that.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is Ben Swan does a video on masks and it gets pulled. Why aren't they letting you see these other perspectives? I mean, somebody having a different perspective on masks is not killing anybody because we haven't established the fact that wearing a mask 100% science has settled that it's going to protect people from the virus. So it's like why are you not letting people have these different perspectives? It's just like we keep saying, it's so obvious, and when it's this obvious, people have to wake up. The people, I mean, and many people have, because that's the other thing. Like, I just did one of those roundtable podcasts where I get a bunch of people from the alternative media community called the Union of the Unwanted, and when we did that, like, a lot of people seemed like they were saying how we're talking about people being brainwashed and people kind of going along with what they're seeing on TV and whatnot, and more people should be angry. And I stopped them and I'm like, no, people are angry. The problem is you're not hearing those voices. So when you're on YouTube, when you're on Facebook, when you're on Twitter, when you're on wherever social media platform you're on, those other voices, the people who are protesting, the people who do have similar opinions to yours, you're not hearing those voices. They're being suppressed, but they're out there, and people are getting upset and people are becoming more aware of what's going on. And I think that in many cases, the COVID-19 thing, like Ben Swan said on my show, like they overplayed their hand because the censorship was turbocharged and was, just completely out of proportion. So much of it was made way more obvious way quicker than it would have been if we didn't have COVID-19. Like the vaccine agenda, way more obvious now than it's ever been. Bill Gates and all the conspiracy theories that kind of surrounded him throughout the years, like all those things became much more obvious than ever. I mean, look at some of his ideologies, like the idea that he's trying to protect the world by pushing vaccines at these poor places in Africa or whatnot. But yet, in the next sentence, he's talking about depopulation and how we needed to. It's like, what are you talking about? I thought you were supposed to help people live longer, and now you're talking about depopulation and the problem with that. So it's like, it's just, I think they, in a way, they did overplay their hand. A lot more people who wouldn't have even entertained some of these things, would have called these things conspiracy theorists, are like, okay, maybe there is more to this, and that's the thing. Like I have a love-hate relationship with Trump because he, when he tells Ghislaine Maxwell, he wishes her well, and he does other things like that, and some of his foreign policy issues I have with him. But in other cases, he does things, and I'm with you. Like where I call a strike, a ball, a ball. Like I just trying to call it as I see it. And but when it comes down to like the fight against Big Pharma, I mean, pretty ballsy for him to come out publicly and say that he was taking oxychloroquine when everybody was demonizing it, and some of the other things he's done. And even before he won, he was outspoken against. What's that?
Yeah. No, I was just saying, and don't fret about the Ghislaine Maxwell, because I still am of the camp that all that's going to come out, and he's not going to be wishing her well once all the truth comes out. So that's posturing for now, because she hasn't gone to trial yet. But if she gets to trial, if they don't get to her first, if she gets to trial, there's going to be all that's going to be exposed. So don't worry, and Trump will not be on her side. He will be the one taking all of them down. So I'm firmly of that belief. But
well, we'll see. But both sides. I mean, obviously, the Dennis Hastert story. I mean, both sides have. They have skeletons in their closets. If she exposes people,
I'm not saying Trump's perfect, but I do believe he's on that particular issue. And I don't want to get far afield on that, but I do believe he's on the side of right on that issue. And in the end, that'll be revealed. But listen, what I want to say is I agree with you about overplaying their hand, and unfortunately, I think how that's going to come to light most starkly is if this vaccine is fast tracked. They want to skip phase 3. They didn't do animal trials on a lot of the versions of the vaccine. If this is fast tracked and they skip the phase 3 and this is just immediately imposed on the public, you're going to see injury and death like you've never seen before. And I hope that doesn't happen, because that's the last thing that's not the way I want us to win, so to speak, and have the truth revealed. I don't want it to be through more human suffering and death. That's what I'm trying to prevent, actually, is more human suffering and death. But that will backfire big time if they do that. And so that's why you're seeing some people like David Gorski and Dorit Rubenstein and some of these other people who are big time, even Paul Offit, big time pro-vax people. You're seeing them come out and actually caution against that and say, no, let's not fast track. No, let's not rush this out, because they know that the integrity and people's faith in the entire vaccine program, not just COVID, but the entire vaccine program, will be just destroyed if this happens. If they see that vaccine injury and death is real, and people know that you really can die from a vaccine. Okay, like so many people that are in our movement that are great freedom fighters that became activists through tragedy. People whose children are very seriously injured, like my child, and other people who have lost children. Okay. It's just absolutely devastating. And it's the worst experience you could ever go through. But once that happens to you and you realize that it's real, I mean, if that happened on a mass scale because of this COVID vaccine, the entire vaccine program would come tumbling down. So It's not something I hope for. Again, I'm being very clear. I don't want it to happen that way. But if they fast track it, that is going to be the result. That is going to be the result. And I just want people to wake up now. Don't let your child, your mother, your grandmother, whomever, be killed or seriously injured by a COVID-19 vaccine that was fast tracked, that was rushed out. Open your eyes. Open your eyes to the information. The research is out there. We're not crazy. We're not conspiracy theorists. I like your version of that. You say alternative media. You use that term a lot instead of conspiracy theorist crowd, because conspiracy theorist makes it sound like we're talking about something that's fake. That's not true. When in reality, we're speaking the truth because we've looked at all the evidence. And yes, I've looked at studies on both sides. I look at the studies that they issue to supposedly say that this coronavirus is as deadly as they're saying, and that masks are supposedly effective, for instance. And there are studies saying that. Okay, but if you dig into the numbers, and if you can read science, and I have to rely on some people that I know that are more scientific, that are doctors and scientists to decipher some of the stuff for me, because I am not a scientist. But if you dig into the numbers and you look at all the studies and take the whole body of evidence, and I wholeheartedly agree with you, you've got to look at everything, Ricky. Don't just look at the studies we're giving you. Look at their studies too. But I'm confident if you look at the whole body of evidence, you'll come to the same conclusion, because it's very, very, very obvious that this is not the bubonic plague. This is not Ebola. It's not what they're making it out to be. And they have fudged the numbers. They've manipulated data, and they've done that to achieve a political goal. And that's it. That's all this is about. And money. And they're doing it, obviously, the vaccine being fast-tracked is all about money. So anyone who doesn't believe that the government isn't hungry for power and that big corporations like pharmaceutical corporations don't have money as their number one goal just is just naive. It's just, obviously you haven't been, I mean, that's just how the world works, period. Never mind with this whole pandemic, with this whole with vaccines, all of the information coming out. Even if none of that existed, it's very, very clear that these multi-billionaires only care about money. They don't care about your health. And so that should automatically make you suspect. But somehow there's people out there that believe that when it comes to vaccines, it must be different. No, we agree with you, Ricky, on Vioxx. We agree with you on HPV vaccine. We agree with you on certain things. We agree with you on certain drugs that have been used. We agree with you even on breast implants. We agree with you on the mesh implants that people have used for hernias. We agree with you on Zantac even. They were evil with regard to that. But no, not with the flu shot or not with the MMR. They couldn't possibly. With that, they're telling us the truth. They're not hiding anything. Suddenly with that, they found Jesus. They found Jesus, and they're just telling the truth, and they have your best interest at heart, and they couldn't possibly be pushing a treatment on you, a drug on you that could be harmful. That's out of the question. Or if there is harm, it's 1 in a million. It's 1 in a million with them. With all these other drugs, yes, we agree. Go after them like big tobacco. But with this, with vaccines, with the MMR, with all of these other vaccines that they're promoting now, there's over 200 in the pipeline. Okay, that they want, many of which will be added to the required schedule for children to enter school. That's why they want to get rid of these religious exemptions. They don't want, and medical exemptions for that matter. It's almost impossible to get a medical exemption in California and in New York, because when they did away with religious, they then did away with medical as well, for all intents and purposes. So even if you have documented reactions, even if your child has suffered seizures, regression, loss of speech, horrible reactions, fevers that last for days, immediately after receiving a vaccine, it doesn't matter. You have to keep giving them to them. We're not writing a medical exemption for that. Even if your child went into anaphylactic shock after receiving a vaccine, they're not writing medical exemptions for those. Okay, so this is again, when you open your eyes to this, most people don't know this stuff that I'm saying, though. Most people don't realize this, okay? They think that this doesn't really happen until it happens to their child, okay? And I don't wish that on anyone. So thank you, Ricky, for having me on again, because I really appreciate the opportunity to share our message with your audience and to just bring more people to the truth, because that's what this is about. And we believe in free speech at the Connecticut Freedom Alliance and We The Patriots USA. Again, we hope that you support us. If you want more information, we're always here to give it. We have resources on our website, ctfreedomalliance.org. We have a whole resources page with links to other organizations and to scientific studies. And we're always happy to provide that with you. If anyone wants more information, we're very, very happy. We're very, very open about sharing information. And we always appreciate the opportunity to be able to come on and discuss it on your show.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I can't thank you enough for coming on. If people want to check out the first time Brian was on the show, he gets more into his personal story, which him and Don, the other co-founder, and I highly recommend people checking that out, because like you said, it's when you're affected personally, then I think it becomes, it's hard not to be passionate about these topics. It's hard not to go in the front lines and fight. And it was episode 230, I believe, of the Ripple Effect podcast. So please check that out. Also, something you said about the testing. I mean, a lot of the vaccine testing that they're doing right now, it's on healthy people. It's on the healthiest people who have no medical issues or whatnot. That's who they're going to test it on, you know? So that means your grandmother or your child or somebody else, there's not going to be any tests that represent how that vaccine is going to react to them specifically, you know? And it's like, I always use the example of peanut butter. If I give every kid in the world peanut butter, some of them are going to get hurt. You know, some of them are going to be injured. Some of them might even die. So it doesn't mean that peanut butter is going to be harmful to everybody, but it also doesn't mean it's safe for everybody. So,
except that never happened until they started using peanut oil in the production of vaccines.
Good point.
So when you and I were children, I mean, how many people did you know with peanut allergy? I don't know how old you are, but
I'm 35.
I know that. Okay, I know I'm in my 40s. Okay, so I know that when I was a child, I didn't know a single person in not only my class, in the school who had a peanut allergy. I knew some people had EpiPens for bee stings. That existed when I was a kid. But there was no prohibition on bringing peanut butter to school because we didn't know anyone that had peanut allergies. Now, it seems like a third of the class has peanut allergies in every single class. And it's because they started using peanut oil. Peanut oil, you see, the whole purpose of a vaccine is to cause a stimulation, and to stimulate the immune system, to cause an immune reaction, okay, an activation, they call it, okay? So if the peanut oil is present and you're creating that kind of action and reaction, that's going to screw things up. And again, it became very obvious that after they started using, you saw a massive rise in peanut allergies. And people say, oh, well, that could be a lot of other things. All right, well, tell me something else that's as logical as that, though. What else? Did they start adding something to peanut butter that makes it more, makes it more allergic? I don't understand what your other explanation could be. If they didn't put something in the peanut butter itself or in peanuts, because it's not just peanut butter, they can't have peanuts. They can't have a peanut without having this reaction. So what caused it? What changed? So it's just, people really have to be willing to use their minds and not just rely on the television to get their information. You have to be willing to read, and I know that takes time, but this is our lives we're talking about. This is our children's future we're talking about. Okay, so it's you've got to be willing to put the time in and to actually read and listen. Listen to your podcast, Ricky. You have some great guests who are sharing truth all the time, every week. I'm really grateful to you. I know you gave us some love at the beginning of this show, but as we're closing here, because I know I do have to run as well, but I just want to thank you for what you're doing. Your podcast, getting this message out and sharing with such a wide audience, and continuing to give a platform for truth, a platform in alternative media. It's people like you that are going to save this country, quite frankly. I don't want to get too dramatic about it, but it's the truth. People like you that are willing to hear all sides. I mean, you'd be willing to have mainstream people on your show. If Fauci wanted to come on your show, you're welcome, and I'm sure.
Yeah, you know? I'd love to debate him or Charlie Baker, who's another guy who I am really learning to hate more and more every day.
Yep.
You're
when you look up rhino in the dictionary, you see his picture there.
Well, so on August, let me see. Let me check my calendar real quick. I'm doing a swap cat or a kind of roundtable discussion on Tuesday the 18th at 3:30 with I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Kendra Becker. She's from Connecticut. I actually
yes, I am. I know Kendra. Yep. She's a great warrior here in Connecticut, and she's a doctor as well. Yeah.
Yeah, she's going to be on with Tim James from Chemical Free Body, which is a natural, supplement and vitamin company. They both been on before, and also I just got Nancy Gerberti on, who's been on. I mean, she's a functional medicine expert. She was on like a long time ago, a few times. But I'm trying to put together like a roundtable discussion specifically about these type of topics. So maybe I'll send you an email with the time and date, and if you and Don want to join us, we'll do a huge little roundtable discussion about all this stuff. Get everybody's different research together, perspectives, opinions, and I'm sure they would love to hear about the work that you're doing with all your nonprofit organizations too. So
yeah, absolutely. Send me the email. Kendra's actually a member of the Freedom Alliance, so she's one of our members. She's a member of other groups in Connecticut as well, but yeah, she's really, really good, and we would love to join that roundtable. We're doing a roundtable, like I said, this week ourselves, probably Thursday or Friday night. I'll have that out. Just look for it in the group, We The Patriots and Connecticut Freedom Alliance, and it should be really exciting. We're hoping to get a couple of doctors on. I don't want to release the names yet as well, but because they haven't been confirmed yet, but we're going to have a couple of doctors hopefully on as part of that roundtable discussion about the COVID-19 vaccine. So just keep an eye out for that. And again, we appreciate your support. Please support the lawsuit. The lawsuit fundraiser, again, can be found on the Connecticut School Mass Lawsuit Facebook group, as well as in the Connecticut Freedom Alliance group. We're just we're doing everything we can to fight these unconstitutional mandates and to bring freedom back to our state and to our country, because Lord knows we need it. We need more people, like I said, like you, Ricky. We need to start networking, all connecting, all of us freedom fighters together. None of us can do it on our own. That's the thing. There's power in numbers, there's strength in numbers. We need to all be joining and unifying together. So, again, thank you for having me on, and I'll look out for that email and look forward to having Don and I back on your show.
Awesome. Thanks again, Brian. Tell Don I said hi. Hopefully we have her on the next time we connect, and keep up the great work, and I'll make sure to send you that email.
All right. Thank you, Ricky. It's been a pleasure.
Brian. Hey, same here. Enjoy your weekend. Thank you. Take care.
Sure. Bye-bye.
Believe in the ripple effect.